Okay, not too concerned with audio or anything this morning. Just a quick little thing. I wanted to talk about Atlas gears, change gears, primarily this morning. I was just sitting here going through the listings like I normally do, and several gears are listed as new listings right off the bat. And I wanted to look at them real close because there's some things that if I don't kind of explain them as soon as I see them, I tend to forget some of this stuff. So I thought this was fairly important for you. So we're looking at our normal little Fleabay listings, and I'm looking at Atlas lathe stuff, and I'm looking at new listings is where we're starting out. And just to kind of give you perspective, so if you want to go and look at these yourself, first thing here is a 10 to 12 inch handle for the tailstock or the apron. You know, that's the first one. Nothing really stands out except I think the shipping's a little high, but nonetheless. The next one down, and there's about, well, there's 4 or 5 gears here, but there's 3 right off the bat from the same seller. And change gears have, for the last few years, gone any place from normally about $10 to about 20, maybe 25 if they're in exceptionally good shape and everything. So I'm looking at one Atlas Craftsman 10-12 inch lathe, 48 tooth change gear. And there's 2 of them here, 2 available. It shows $25.99 and $5 shipping. Now, I think that's a little bit expensive, but by the same token, you know, it's what the market will bear, and it's what we're allowing as consumers, these people, to charge as they tear apart these machines. So this seller's been around for a little while anyway. You know, he does quite a few things here. But when you look at the pictures for this, why you go in and it's listed as used, and they are used. You know, both of these I would consider to be an acceptable gear if you're buying gears. When you look at the second picture on these, they're kind of set up and angled together. You can see especially the gear on the left has had quite a bit of crap run in it. It's kind of chewed up on the teeth if you look at the bottom of the picture especially, and as you go on up, why there's some wear there. Nothing, you know, nothing really wrong with those gears, except I think we're paying too much at 26 bucks a piece. So that's the first one I see. Now when I go to the next one down is a lead screw bearing. I won't even comment there right now. Let's see, nice used 9 to 12 inch lathe, 40 tooth change gear, and they're wanting $35 for it. This is from the same seller. Now this gear looks a little bit nicer when you initially look at it. It's been cleaned up some. When you look at the first picture, if you're looking at the lower left hand corner of that gear, you can see it rolled in there a little bit. And when you start really looking at teeth profile on there, those teeth have been worn down a little bit. Now when you look at these teeth like this, you'll primarily see this wear on one side of the gear or the other. You're not going to see it on both because the gears tend to ride to one side or the other. They don't line up perfectly, so a lot of times you'll see that. When you look at the next picture, the profiles look pretty good pretty much all the way around, and it looks like a fairly good gear from that position. When you look at the third picture, it doesn't look bad, you know. So it's not a bad gear, but it has been run a little bit tight. Now when you only see the rolling or the wear or the teeth profile worn down on one portion of these gears, you want to remember when these were manufactured, they were manufactured in a permanent mold, and buildup of tolerances between the gearing and everything, they're not perfectly concentric. So a lot of times you'll see some wear on one side of a gear as opposed to the other. When you actually look at the specs, I think the recommendation is you just run a piece of notebook paper in between the gears, and it should, you know, that should give you your clearance, something along those lines. These gears were intended to actually be run fairly loose. Now they're a little bit louder that way, so, and you've got to have them in tight enough to where they do engage. You know, I mean, if you leave them too far out, well, they're going to whack the teeth off and not have any engagement. So you do have to have them engaged, but they're designed to be run relatively loose for their tolerances. So That's the second listing, and $35. That's just too much for gear. You know, I mean, I've got to be really hard pressed to need a gear for something like that on an Atlas to go out and spend that kind of money. I'm going to sit back and watch, and when they get back into that, you know, that's probably a $12 to $15 gear is what that should be going for. Now the next one is what the one that caught my eye and the one that inspired this little conversation we're having here. And this, I believe, is from the same seller. We'll look in just a minute. New old stock Atlas Craftsman 9 to 12 inch lathe 9101-40A 42 change gear new, and it's listed as new. Next thing says new open box. They want $68.99 and $4.99 shipping for it. And yes, this is from the same seller. Now, this is a rip. You want to avoid this one at all costs. Now, when you look at this, and I believe it is true, it probably is a new open box. It shows a little bit of marking, so has it been on a machine? I can't tell you 100% for certain, but I do see some markings on there. Now, if it is new, if it hasn't been used, it's been beat around a fair amount for a lot of years. Now, this is a really dark patinaed gear, and part of these you saw were black in the down on the recesses. You know, maybe they were painted from the factory, maybe they were just, you know, oiled up and it soaked in and you ended up with a darker color, whatever the case. Anyway, this gear's been around for quite a while, and when you look at it, we've got all kinds of little, and this is the very first picture I'm looking at that's listed here, or that's shown here. And when you zoom in on it, you've got all kinds of little white markings. That's corrosion. That's from it sitting in a moist environment. So even if it's a new gear, it's been not well taken care of for years, type of thing. So to me, this gear is kind of compromised anyway. It would probably be fine. It would probably last you as long as you're going to want to run it on your machine. But depending on actual condition of it and stuff, and what kind of an environment it was and what the deterioration actually is, it may disintegrate on you. You know, I mean, I honestly don't know. When you look at it, well, you can see some marks down on the inside where it's been cleaned off, you know, whether there was a brush, a Scotch-Brite, whatever the case may be, but in the lower right quadrant of that gear, well, you can see quite a bit of scraping there. So that's the first thing that tells me I'm going to avoid this gear to start with. Second picture, you can see some of that rolling on the edges on those gears on the lower left-hand corner. And that's the only place that's really apparent, is in that lower left-hand side, basically, of that gear. That may be from the casting process, but that almost tends to look like, to me, that has been on a machine. Now, there again, could be wrong. I've already been, you know, it's already flagged itself to me by the patina and the white corrosion marks on it. So that's the second thing. Now, when you go to the third picture, and this is the other side of the gear that we're looking at, look at that hub, and you can see, especially on the bottom half, there's all kinds of corrosion marks there, and that's literally what that is. That's satin moisture is what that is. And fourth picture is just kind of a tooth picture. Doesn't tell me any more than what I already need to know. You know, I see some corrosion marking down in there and stuff. I'm going to avoid this gear like the plague, and for them to be asking $68.99 for it and another $5 shipping, I don't know what the justification for that is, because this seller's been around long enough. He knows what's going on here. So the point of this is just be diligent in what you're looking at, because you're going to be overcharged if they possibly can, you know. And the idea that this is a new old stock, new open box doesn't mean anything in the world of Atlas machines, because you'll see a lot of parts that are offered this way as new old stock. And they may very well be, and they may not have been on a machine, but if they've been kept in a moist environment for the last 20, 30 years, whatever the case may be, the plating's going to be peeling off of them or separating from the Zamac material underneath, or whatever material is underneath that has been coated on, whatever the case may be. So just because it says new old stock, that doesn't mean anything. You know, that flags to me. And I think we have a lot of unscrupulous sellers that are doing things very reminiscent of in the old days when somebody wanted to sell their car or their truck and the transmission was going bad, so they filled it with sawdust, so you couldn't hear that howling noise. So anyway, just be aware of that. Next listing down is a new old stock original Atlas Craftsman 1012 lathe 50 tooth change gear, 37.50 and 5 1/4. Now this is a fairly new seller, and I see some stuff out here that, and with a lot of these sellers you see good and bad. And the only reason I bring up this gear is this looks to be a new manufactured part, and it looks in very good condition. Now, one of the things that tells me this is a newer part is when you look at the rim in the first picture and the second picture, there's two pictures there, you'll see machine marks on the edge of those gear teeth on that outer ring of the hub, or the outer ring of the gear itself where the teeth are. That's been machined down. That's not straight out of a die casting like the originals would have been done. So to me, this is a newly manufactured gear, at least fairly recently. Looks to be in real good shape, and $37.50 may not be an unfair price. Now that pretty much covers gears. What I did do this morning, and I've said before that a lot of these parts are still available from Clausing, who's the owner of Atlas, and I emailed them this morning inquiring about things like gears and change gears, and then the miter gears on the lead screw and that type of thing. And I haven't heard back from them. I just sent that email off a little bit ago. Actually, let me look here very quickly. I think probably that those parts are going to be, let's see, I do have an email here. I think a lot of these parts are going to be available from Clausing still. So when you start looking at these, okay, so the email that I have back from Clausing, and I just sent this off, probably a half an hour ago or so. That I sent off just a little bit ago, and this is what I got back. Hi Dan, there are actually quite a few parts available for the Atlas machines. We can send you a manual for your machine if we have the model number and serial number. This way you can advise the part numbers you would like quoted. So I speculate, and they finish it out. We appreciate your business. Brian Axe, Customer Service Manager, 800-323-0972. So there's their number, 800-323-0972. So if you actually need parts and you're comparing them to these on Fleabay, I would very strongly suggest that give them a call with your information, see what they have to offer you, and then go from there, because all of these parts I believe that are being offered on eBay are just being resold from Clausing, and they're obviously marking them up to make their profit on them. So we're staying along this thing, make your machines affordable again. So that's what we're trying to do here with this. So yeah, I think we eliminated that marked up high price market just with that right there on new old stock parts. If they're original equipment manufacturer, new old stock stuff, it's very well worthwhile, I think, to probably give Clausing a call. Now they may be overpriced. You know, I mean, it may be something that, and I won't say overpriced because they're still manufacturing Clausing machines and CNC stuff and everything, so they're a big operation. When I compare maybe them to going to, and I can't tell you what the name is, the people that have Sheldon, most of those parts from them are overly expensive. It's kind of tough to buy new gearing and stuff for your Sheldon. They are still available, but they cost you quite a bit. So that's not feasible in that respect. But I think probably the Atlas stuff may be very, very competitive, and I think is probably going to be less expensive than buying it from some of these resellers on Fleabay. So anyway, that's the deal with change gears and stuff. So a few other things going on down, and a couple of things that I want to touch on before we do that on gearing. And you can tell I just grabbed a couple of gears that I had to kind of show, and these either came on parts that I bought or machines that I bought, or on accessories I bought, because I don't think any of these were individual gear buys. Now this is a 48 tooth, I believe, and this gear is in relatively good condition, but there was one place, if I can find it here, see if I can see, my lighting's bad in here, get over here so we can see, right there on that tooth, and I don't know how well that's going to show up. If you look, that one tooth has been filed down, and I don't know, like I say, exactly where I acquired any of these teeth. Part of them were on accessories and stuff. That tooth has been filed down, so it got whacked at some point in time. You know, there was something there that's not right. And here I've got a gear set, and there again I believe most of these parts are going to be available. That outer gear looks okay. The smaller inner gear is the one that I wanted to look at, and you want to look at the tooth profile on those and look at the wear down in the gullets and everything. This gear has been run way too tight for long enough to just really chew up that gear. So on stuff like the index center, these gears will work fine for my milling index centers. But as far as actual change teeth on an Atlas, probably not the best choice. You know, well worn, you're going to have a lot of backlash in there. So anyway, that's kind of gears. I did want to talk about that. The other thing, and there was just a couple other ones I want to go, and then I'll quit my little ranting and raving because I had things to do today. But tailstock oil dippers. I sell a reproduction. I think they're at $25, and then flat rate shipping. There again, when I transfer that to the new site, that's going to get changed a little bit. At least on shipping, we'll get that down. $27.95 and $5.10 shipping. Now, the thing that gets me about this one is it's another one, excellent original Atlas. Now, when you look at the picture of this, if you look at that kind of a dull matte finish that's on there and a little bit of off color that you expect, that part's been bead blasted, either sandblasted or bead blasted. From looking at the finish, I would say that's been bead blasted. That's normally hiding things, I guess, is just the best way of putting that. Now, it probably is original from the looks of it. It's not a bad part at all. Is it worth ultimately $33? Probably not, but that's for you to decide. But be aware when you see that matte finish on any of these parts, and there's a couple other ones, and then I'm going to close this out, but anytime you see that matte finish, why there's things that we're hiding defects usually. Original ones of these were not exceptionally finely finished anyway. They were a steel turning. They just got turned. Usually they had high-speed production marks in them, we'll call. They had rings around them where they weren't a real smooth finish on them anyway. So there was the first one. I go on down. Now there is a couple of lathe beds here, and I've warned you about lathe beds before. These guys are touting them as excellent and you know, no wear and all that crap, and trying to get $200 and $300 and then another $100 to $200 shipping on them. There are two listed here, and they're by the same seller. I think they're down in California. The first one's Atlas Craftsman 42-inch metal lathe bed, 942-C, $75 free local pickup. And the second one's listed at $70. I think it's a later lathe bed from looking at the feet. If you're going to buy a used one, especially if you don't know what condition you're getting, and you do know what condition you're getting a wore-out lathe bed. I mean, there's no excellent lathe beds. There's no original new old stock. You know, there's none of that crap. These are all used and abused. So look at it from that perspective. If you are looking to buy a lathe bed, $75 is probably a fair price, and that's probably about the most that I would spend on one. So that's my take there. Oh, here's your bevel pin set for your $26 now. You know, we've already debunked that with our $5 set that are on the website. Now here's another oil stock dauber, $16.99 and $1.99 shipping. That's a pretty good buy. You know, you look at that picture, it is original. It's not finely finished on the top, or you know, but the originals weren't. So there was one other thing I was looking at here. I thought maybe that's, yeah. Now we're down into other stuff. Oh, here it was. Very nice original Atlas 10-inch lathe countershaft grease cup, $14.75 and $5.20 shipping. Now for what they've been going for as complete sets, that's probably not a bad buy. You know, 20 bucks if you need that grease cut. In the big picture of things, that's kind of expensive, but that's about what the market's going for. You know, if I were to reproduce that part, it would have to go for that much, maybe a little bit more, you know, for the time invested in doing it. So that's not a bad price for that. But when you look at that one, it's from a seller that this newer seller that I had said had bead blasted parts earlier. This is that same thing. This has got that matte finish on it. It's been bead blasted. So in one sense, on a lot of these parts, it will just clean it up nicer than leaving it, but it hides any surface defects to a certain degree, or makes them better than what they were. So just be aware of that. Be looking for those. Same way on gearing and stuff. I saw a headstock. I've seen a couple of headstocks that have been parted out. One had a complete headstock. One showed, or one advertised, and it was just the bare headstock casting, and it did have the caps with it. It was a Babbitt bearing headstock, and it's excellent condition. No markings on the spindle that had been taken, that was originally running it. Well, why have you ripped that spindle out other than to try and make more money selling it separately? You know, if it was fitted to those bearings, to those Babbitt bearings, and when you looked at the Babbitt bearings, they were scored. There was markings in there, but that's what it was designed to do. You'd rather have your scoring in those Babbitts that at that time would have been replaceable than it was to replace the spindle. So never should have been parted out. You know, there was another one, and this is my last thing, and then I'll go. And this goes back to the sandblasting or bead blasting parts. There was a Timken bearing headstock that had the spindle, the gears, all that good, or the pulleys, and everything in the headstock with the basic headstock. The dog bumping the camera. The problem I had with it, and the headstock had not been refinished, although it had been cleaned up and it had been disassembled, because you could see from looking at the pulleys, especially the 4-shield pulley, that it had this same matte finish, and this was that last eBay purchase I got from the milling machine. Had that matte finish on that pulley. That's an indication when they're fairly consistent or fairly even all the way around and have that gray patina on them. They've been bead blasted or sandblasted. So they disassembled that headstock, sandblasted or bead blasted it, which is probably pretty hard on those bearings if they weren't protected well enough, and takes down edges on your gearing and things like that, and usually hides a whole bunch of corrosion or pitting in them, which there's a little bit of that in this pulley too. But they're hiding things there to get more money for a machine they're parting out. So don't fall for that. You know, be aware of what's going on there, and we can all go on our merry way again. But anyway, source of parts may very well be clausing. So I think that may be the best option for new old stock replacement parts if we're rebuilding the machine. You know, there's lots of guys like me that are building, well, there's not lots, but there's guys like me that are building some replacement parts for them. But just be aware of what you're looking at when you are looking for parts on Fleabay here. So anyway, hopefully that gives you a little more information. You're a little bit better prepared. And comments or suggestions, leave in the comments section for me below. And thanks for taking the time to watch, guys.